woke up, it's freezing here in Grable in South Carolina. So overcast now, and but above freezing, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Wasn't bad on that cruise either. I was surprised. It was a lot of sunshine and a little foggy in the morning sometimes, but we, we're a big parker on and gloves and ski hat and stuff like that, and long johns. You were very comfortable, even on the Zodiacs, bouncing around.
Oh, good. Okay, Kent, talk now.
Yes.
Oh, there you are. All right. So, Charlie Duke, please meet Kent Slayton. Kent Slayton, please meet Charlie Duke.
Hey, Ken.
Hey, Charlie. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. Don't see your picture, but anyway, glad we're on together, and look forward to our time together.
I'm sure if you met him way, way back when you were all working at NASA, I'm sure he looks a little different from that.
But yeah, I bet. Yeah. A different neighborhood. So, our kids didn't play together. They're a little bit older, I think, than our boys. We were the fifth group and the first group, of course. So I really respected Deke. He was a great boss, a great leader, and we worked together well. Always respected him.
Charlie, how old are your kids?
Charles is 50. Let's see, he's born in 65, so he's coming up on 59, and then Tom is 2 years younger. So Charles is in business for himself now, and and then Tom's a Delta pilot. He's 2 years.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So one of your sons is a pilot. Do you still fly, Charlie?
Not really. I'm not. Still got my license, but nothing's current. It'd take me 6 months to get current again. And Dottie doesn't like little airplanes, so we've never owned one. We used to borrow one all the time from friends down in Houston and other places, and we had a few little, to her, scary calls, so she doesn't get on a little airplane anymore. So why should I try to get checked out when all I'd have to do is fly around the countryside? So I've given it up, but it'd take me a year to get recurrent again. I think I'm still qualified. I got past the best school and everything at NASA. And, I'll just ride now. Kibitz.
Charlie, I just want to say this has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today. But I read your book over the weekend, and obviously it included a little bit of Dottie telling her story. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciated the honesty that you both put into that book, because what you guys talked about with how your job affected your relationship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's very hard to talk about. So I really appreciated that part of your book.
Well, I'll tell her. I'll send you. She's got a little booklet called "From Sadness to Joy," and I'll send it to you after we hang up and put it in the mail for you. Yeah, you'll enjoy it. Most out of our Moonwalker book, but I think she has some other stuff also. So, well, she was glad to do it. God's really healed our marriage and given us 61 great years together now.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I got to the line that said, Dottie will just have to take a back seat, I thought, that's not very nice.
No.
So I really appreciated seeing how you guys worked that out and worked together and all that. So thank you for that, both of you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're glad it's been helpful to a lot of people around the country.
Yeah, and that was interesting to read too about once, well, I'll just throw it out there. Once you embraced God and Jesus, and how you carried that forward and paid that forward. That was very interesting too.
Yeah. Well, it's been a life changer, of course.
I'm sure a lot of other astronaut wives would know exactly what Dottie was talking about in her section. Okay. We still have technically 4 more minutes, and we have a lot of people who signed up for this one. So I'm still working on admitting people.
Okay.
You must have a big following in England because we have the most people from England on this one.
Yeah, I've spoken over there quite a few times, and enjoy going over there. You can speak the language and enjoy the big. So, good people really are. My ancestors came from England on my mom's side. Yeah.
Yeah, we usually have a few from England, but we definitely have more this time.
Good.
People are already putting questions for you in the chat.
Yeah, I see that.
They started in very quickly.
Questions, Lisa, were very nice. Don't forget to answer all of those.
Yeah, and actually, of course, as I was reading your book, I wrote more and more and more, and then I thought I can't ask all of these, or we won't have time for other people's. So hopefully they'll overlap a little bit, also.
Okay.
Oh, I bet it's this. All right, I'm actually going to go ahead and hit record, and we're just going to get started a little bit early since we have so many people here already.
Okay.
Are you recording? It didn't say.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to Sharing Space with Deke featuring Charlie Duke. I'm really excited to say that we have 19 people who are attending their very first Sharing Space with Deke. And that includes our first people from Poland and our first from New Zealand. So very excited to expand the area that we're covering. I am just going to jump right in with some questions that I have. We'll hopefully get to as many of your questions as well. If you have questions for Charlie, put them in the chat. My first question, Charlie, I read that when you were doing your master's thesis at MIT, you met Charlie Bassett and some other astronauts, and you were very impressed and inspired by how excited Charlie was about his job and how much love and passion he showed. Is that when you decided seriously to think about being an astronaut?
Yeah, I had never considered it really. I was over in Germany as a fighter pilot and had a great job. It was very exciting. And in 1961, of course, Yuri Gagarin went off in April, and right after that, Alan Shepard went off, and the excitement of the space race got me a little bit excited, but I wasn't really qualified. So after that, after my assignment was up, in May of '62, I went to reassigned to MIT. And my second year, starting in '63, I guess it was, I was needed a thesis, and the Apollo guidance and navigation system was being built by MIT at the then called the instrumentation lab. And so they needed a pilot to see if you could really work this system and point the crosshairs and everything that as you look through the telescope and the sextant. So me and I and another not Apollo, but I and another Air Force officer did this. And during the time we were working on our thesis, several astronauts came to visit to look at the system. And I remember Bassett and mostly the second and third group. But I'd never met anybody that was so excited about a job than these guys. And I said, man, y'all, it was really something. And Space Corps program was really going. And so I said, how did I get that job? And it was Charlie or somebody said, well, you can finish your degree and go to test pilot school and you might have a chance. So I followed their advice. I applied for test pilot school and I got my degree and was selected for test pilot school. Started just a couple of months after I got my degree in June of '64. And there I worked for Deke Slayton and I worked for Chuck Yeager then, and went through school and did really well. And the next year, after I got on staff of this would be the summer of '65, the Air Force started having a selection of astronauts for MOL. And then NASA announced a group selection. It would begin in September of '65. So my deputy boss at the test pilot school said, Charlie, if you volunteer for NASA and MOL, I guarantee I'm going to take you. And so Stu Russa and myself and Al Warden were in that same boat. And we started discussing it. You know, the Air Force didn't have a very good record of man in space, but NASA does. So we decided we'd only volunteer for NASA. And so we volunteered for NASA, and all three of us got selected in going through the selection process from September until we reported in April of '66. So I had just made that decision. It was going to be NASA or nothing. And so I got selected, and we moved to Houston in April '66.
Do you remember the first time that you met Deke Slayton?
Yeah, he was I would call him chief of the selection committee board. And we had a 3 or 4 hour interview with him. And I was very impressed. Let's see, it was John Young was on it, Deke, a guy named Dave North, and I don't remember. There's several others, but I don't remember the rest. But Deke chaired the board. And we had been called to Houston for this interview, and it was downtown. It was sort of secret back in those days who they were talking to, and so I spent 3 or 4 hours being interviewed by Deke and John Young, and as I said, the others, and I just hopefully did okay because I got selected. So I didn't know, they were non-committal at the end. They were still interviewing a lot of folks. But it was really a delight a couple of months later when Deke called and said, Charlie, we picked you for the program. If you still want to come. I said, you bet I want to come. And so he said, okay, report in by April 1st, I think it was, or maybe May 1st of '66. So we moved from Houston to Houston from Edwards Air Force Base. And it was a good job I gave up out there. Flying those airplanes was fun, and working at test pilot school. Yeager was a great boss. But, the ultimate job you could have was as a Apollo astronaut. So Stu Russo, myself, and Al Warden took it. And later on, Mike not Mike, but Hank Hartsfield, who was also in our space flight, not space flight, but they call it the Aerospace Research Pilot School. We were all in, 4 of us were in the same boat, same class. So NASA, after Man Orbiting Laboratory collapsed, Hank came over and became an Apollo astronaut with several other guys like Truly and I can't remember them all now.
Crippen.
Crippen, yeah, that was
Yep.
Popco, guys like that. Of course, they never got to fly an Apollo, but they all did a very successful career in space shuttle.
If John Young was on your interview panel, you had quite a long relationship with him.
Did, yeah. He was basically, I would call him more of a mentor to me, and he had a big influence on my career as a Apollo astronaut. Stu Russo, after the fire on Apollo 1, once they got the spacecraft redesigned, Stu Russo and I were the astronauts on the escape. We had an emergency egress escape working group. And Stu and Russo and I were the 2 astronauts that did this and worked out a way to get off, a couple of ways to get off the launch pad. And so John was excited about, he was followed it and that desire. And then he was, I got put on a support crew for Apollo 10, where he was to fly as command module pilot. And then we got both put on backup for Apollo 13. Then we flew together on 16. And on 17, I talked him into, let's go do backup on 17. And he said, first I had to argue him into it because he said, it's a dead end job. I said, nobody, it's the last flight. You know, what do they need a backup crew? I said, John, they might break their leg and we get and but that didn't happen. You know, I didn't wish it on anybody, but it was an outside chance. So, and we were excited about going to the moon again, but we didn't get to go.
Yeah. Raul just pointed out that today is the 7th anniversary of John's passing. So it's very appropriate that we are talking about him today.
Well, thank you for reminding me of that. I got to give Susie a call. You know.
Yeah, I'm sure that she would appreciate that. Something that still gets talked about, and you talked about this in your oral history, is how you still don't know how Deke selected crews. And like I said, this is still a topic of conversation for a lot of people. Do you think it was better for you guys not to know exactly how he chose, or do you wish that you had known?
I think it was better not to know, because if you knew, you would try to vector yourself into the right path. And so with not knowing exactly how it was selected, you just worked whatever job you got. You just worked to the best of your ability, and hopefully you get recognized. And I think the way it went was Deke and Al Shepard were the select. They picked a command. I think they picked a commander. Then they sat down with, for my case, John Young, and say, John, who do you want to fly with? And these are some of the possibilities. And so I had worked for John on support crew for Apollo 10. And then after that flight was over, I was Capcom for Apollo 11 and for Neil and them when they landed. And so that exposure, I think, when this was even before the backup for Apollo 13. And I was selected, we were selected as, John selected me as lunar module pilot, and then Jack Schweikert was the lunar module, not lunar module, but command module pilot. And so that just worked out really well. And I respected John. He was a great mentor and a a tremendous example to learn from and follow. But he's very humble, very, very humble guy.
You know, you say that, and I feel like every astronaut, not that I've talked to every astronaut, but the astronauts that I have had the honor to interact with, I feel like you're all just very humble people who just had an extraordinary job.
Well, I don't think it made any points walking around with it. Hey, look at me! I'm the best in the office. So everybody took a humble attitude that, as I recall. I never remember anybody that was bragging about, hey, I got picked before you did, or this and that. There was none of that in the office.
Not super on point, but going along with the humbleness. Here at the museum, I did some QR codes where Deke kind of tells his story, and I sent all those videos to his brother Dick, and he wrote back, "Oh, those are really nice, but they're kind of braggy." And Don, because family always calls him Don, Don wouldn't have been like that, and I was, yeah, he probably wouldn't have been that way, but we're a museum. We kind of have to brag about him.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Good boss. I think he ran a good ship as director of flight crew operations. Then when he got back on flight status later on, I was really pleased for him and Shepard too. They would work really hard, and it would have been really tragic that neither one of them from the first group got to fly. Well, Deke didn't, but Shepard did. But then he got grounded too. So I was so pleased to see him back on flight status.
I think it just makes his story so perfect. And it's one of those things where he was probably super upset, but there was a reason for what happened, and that reason was the rest of his career. It may not have been as amazing as it was had he gotten to go on his Mercury mission.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about Bruce McCandless.
Yeah.
He was in the office for years and years and years, and then he got to do Hubble and the picture.
Yeah. He was across the street, around the block neighbor of ours, and
Okay.
Deke and them, they lived over in Timber Cove, I remember, and we lived in El Lago, just across the lake, and we had a lot of astronauts in our neighborhood. We built a house right next to Bill Anders, and right behind us was a block away was Neil's house, and then Frank Foreman lived in the neighborhood. John lived in the neighborhood. Tom Stafford lived in the neighborhood. Stu Russo lived in the neighborhood. I could go on and on and on. It was a neighborhood. You were either an astronaut or your parents worked at NASA doing something.
Yeah. And what neighborhood did you grow up in?
We grew up on the other side of the freeway, a little town called Friendswood. It was a little Quaker town.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was kind of, again, my parents' decision was to kind of get us a little bit more remote, I think, from all of the activity that was going on. I think they wanted me to kind of have an experience that was kind of not so NASA-centric. But it was a great place to grow up. They call it Mayberry RFD because we had one police officer.
It's a nice neighborhood, wasn't it? In Timber Cove, I realize now y'all lived in Friendswood, but there was let's see, who lived over there? It was
Wally Schirra lived there. I see
Grissom.
Gus Grissom.
I think Grissom, and then Jim Lovell lived over there too. Yeah. So there were several neighborhoods around. A lot of our group ended up in Friendswood also. Yeah.
Okay.
I just had a real quick question. Just talking about the homes. I have a memory that somebody's house burned down, and I want to say that it was Neil's house. Did Neil's house burn down in the early years?
It wasn't Neil's house. It was on Lakeshore Drive, and it was I think it belonged. It was either had oh shoot. Well, I don't remember. I don't remember who it was, but it was right around the corner from us during that time, and but I don't remember it. Ed, some guy put up. It wasn't Ed White's house. I know that. He lived next to Neil on the street right behind us. We lived on Lakeshore Drive, and the house burned down on Lakeshore Drive, but I don't remember the name of the house now.
Well, according to Lois, and Lois is kind of a smarty pants of the group. She knows everything. She said it was Neil's house and that Ed helped put out the fire.
Okay, that wasn't the one I was thinking about. Maybe I don't remember that at all.
Oh.
It's amazing that I couldn't remember that Neil Armstrong's house burned down. I just didn't. If my wife was here, she could tell you exactly. But she stayed up on that stuff.
Well, we'll forgive you for not remembering everything that happened all those years ago. Okay, so as part of the support crew for Apollo 10, you helped develop the lunar module procedures for activation and checkout. And so then I read that due to your knowledge of the LEM, you were asked by Commander Tom Stafford to be the Capcom for Apollo 10, and then also asked by Commander Neil Armstrong to be the Capcom for Apollo 11. Was that normal for the commanders to request Capcoms?
Well, I'm not sure about whether I'd say normal or not, but I was the support crew on Apollo 10 and had worked mainly on the lunar module procedures. So it would be wise to have somebody in mission control that knew the crew and knew the procedures to be Capcom for that lunar activation and descent, simulated descent. And so I was the guy that was that was selected to do that. And I really don't know. I think, the flight directors, they would say, hey, we need some Capcoms. And I don't know how they were selected, except in my case, I think that Tom Stafford said, hey, Charlie's the guy that's been working on these procedures. He's your guy. So I was put in mission control. We had a couple of months to train. And the flight, we did a good job. And then after that, Neil came. Apollo 11 was the next flight. And so the whole team just swapped over to Apollo 11. And and the whole team was the flight controllers and flight directors and Gene Trance and stuff. And so I wasn't supposed to go. But Neil said, hey, you did it for them. Why don't you do it for us? You're more familiar with these procedures than anybody else. So it was a great honor. So when he asked me to do it, he said, you bet, I wouldn't miss it. So we had 2 months to train, get ready.
Wow. So you were talking as Capcom, and you have said that Deke told you to shut up.
Yeah.
Did he really use the words shut up?
He did. And he was sitting there beside me, and I don't remember the phase of the mission, but we were somewhere in descent. And I was just giving them this rundown, I was almost like a basketball commentator, and giving the crew all this background, which they really didn't need. And Deke looked over and said, shut up and let them land. It shocked me, man. I say, yes, sir. And from then on, it was only say what flight director said you say to say. But after they landed, it was we all erupted, of course, with enthusiasm and great relief. The tension, I'd say the tension in mission control the last 5 minutes was the highest I've ever experienced. In fact, it was more tense in that last 5 minutes of them landing than it was for me to step onto the land on the moon in Apollo 16. It was just different. You were in a room with people, everybody's so focused on their little panel and their little system that you tended to lose the perspective of the whole, what was really going on. And so I got at the end when they landed, and Neil had told me, and the only 4 people that knew that he was going to change the call sign from Eagle to Tranquility Base was the 3 of them and me. And so I said, okay. And I knew it was coming when he was so calm. He said, Tranquility Base, Eagle has landed. And I was so excited. It came out twang at first. It was, I corrected myself, Project Tranquility, we copied on the ground. And Neil was just cool stone. I'll tell you, it was amazing. And to have been there and been experience that great thrill, that first landing.
And obviously, when they landed, you got to celebrate a little bit, and then you had to get right back to work. If they're able to stay. When did it really sink in for you that people just landed on the moon? We did it.
Well, I think it was after this conversation with Neil, and they started describing the lunar surface and the excitement of it all. And we didn't have any TV right away. It was only until Neil got outside and deployed the Mesa, which had the camera in it, that we really saw it. Up to that point, it was just verbal and artist renditions, and it was really it sunk into me. Well, right away, we made it. I mean, mission control, we had a big cheer and clapping, but France got everybody right back to work, because if we sprung a leak on landing or some electrical system was wrong, we had to get ready to abort right away. And so we had a 5-minute abort, then we had let's say 15-minute abort, and we safed the spacecraft slowly over the next hour, and then we changed crews in mission control.
On Apollo 13, you were part of the backup crew. So I imagine once the explosion happened, you were probably critical for getting them home. What were you responsible for?
I was a lunar module pilot, and we had trained, from August of 69 until they launched in March of 70, I think it was. And so John Young and I were the lunar module crew, and Jack Schweikert was the command module pilot and the backup crew. So we worked right along and helped them develop the procedures. And with our experience from Apollo 10 and me and Apollo 11, we were pretty thoroughly acquainted with the lunar module and the flight plan. And so I think it's about 10 days before the launch, I caught the measles and exposed everybody the measles, and oh no. And so and they asked, Deke asked Lovell, hey, we can cancel this thing. And he said, well, I don't know, why don't we try a swap? I guess that's how it went. Anyway, they took Schweikert in and put him in place of Mattingly, who had never had the measles. And so they started training, and a week later, I guess Lovell and Deke got together and said, you guys ready to go? And Lovell said, we're ready to go. So they said, okay, we're going to launch. And So I was recovering at home, and then 55 hours out, a couple of days later, the oxygen tank blew up, one of them, and so it was real serious emergency. So John and Mattingly and I came into Mission Control, and we were there for 35 hours till we were satisfied that we got enough stuff and we know what we're doing. We're going to get them back okay. So John and I helped with the burn to get them back on free return. They were not on a free return. Is if when you whip around the moon, you're going to come back to Earth. If you're not on a free return, you whip around the moon and you go off into space somewhere. Well, they were on that kind of trajectory. So we developed the lunar module procedures that we'd worked on a little bit before, to use the lunar module as the lifeboat and the engine to get them back into free return trajectory. And that took a while. And we worked those out. And I think also with Cernan and Joe Engel, who were prime on 17. And that all went well. And then after that, we just had to use the LEM for a lifeboat. And we started, it didn't look like to me we were going to make it. You look at power usage, you look at CO2 removal, all that stuff was given out 10 hours before we got back. So we got to do something. And so we started juggling, turn this off, turn that on, turn this off, just turn everything off, whatever, until we need it. And so that helped with the power. And it turned out that water was a very critical ingredient. We only had a water tank you could not fill in the lunar module. So we were rationing water to the crew and on the way home. And so John and I and Mattingly and Cernan and his crew, Evans and at that time Joe Engel, we were there. Somebody was there to help Mission Control if they needed help during the flight home. And so it was touch and go, but Mission Control saved the day. And I look back now on Mission Control, and they were the heroes of Apollo. They saved the day on every flight. They did something that saved a mission or saved procedures. I mean, an event. And it happened on our flight. We were 1 hour before landing when Mattingly had to change his orbit with the main engine, and it didn't work. The engine was flopping around like uncontrollable in the back. And so he said, I can't burn. And John said, well, John told him, don't burn. When he said that, we weren't going to land the next hour. And so it was 6 hours later, 4 hours later, when they finally understood what was wrong. They couldn't fix it, but they had a workaround. And then 6 hours later, we landed. That was the last rev that Apollo 16 could land on the moon, because the moon was rotating out from under our orbit, and we could not, 8 hours, we could not have enough fuel to go back cross range to get back to our landing site. So I just give big hoorahs to Mission Control on every flight.
I've read, your book, your oral history. I've listened to some interviews, and you were always very, very complimentary of Mission Control. And you are absolutely correct. Without them, you guys wouldn't be doing anything.
No, they were well trained. Had two great flight directors, Krantz and Larry. Gosh. In my memory, at my age, names are going out of sight here. Not Larry, it's his brother. Anyway, somebody's online can remember if it's Jerry Griffin. That's who it was. Jerry Griffin made the decision. Deke, I can remember Deke, a picture. I found this out later, but I can remember a little movie that somebody had done in Mission Control discussing whether we were going to land or not on Apollo 16.
Oh.
So Jerry Griffin was a flight director, and I remember Deke and in the picture, and Rocco Petrone from Washington, and Chris Kraft. And finally, Chris said, "Okay, Jerry, you got the decision." And they just quieted down. And Jerry made the decision, we'll go. And it was hallelujah moment for me. I'll tell you, it was just something that we got 6 hours late. We got to go for landing, because that turned out to be one of the greatest experiences of my life.
You know, that really comes across, your excitement in your book. And as I was reading it, I was wondering, would you like to, reenact, per se, your Apollo 16 flight, but not have to do any of the work, just so that you could enjoy looking out the window, looking at the moon, enjoy doing your lunar Olympics without all the work? Would you like to go again?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's why we volunteered for backup on 17. I don't think it would be any fun not to do any work, though. I mean, just to ride around as a passenger would be a little boring, actually, to me. I like to get involved in the operations and being a pilot. You got to have to do it, instead of just sitting there, say, ho hum as a passenger.
Okay, you can do half the work, and then you can have the other half of the time just to enjoy everything that's there, because your excitement is just unreal.
Well, I enjoyed. I mean, I was excited on Apollo 16. We had experiments going out, and we had some problems come up, and we tried this, that, and the other, and so it was a full-time a job. You just didn't. We had some times when we eat meals that we'd listen to some music and that we brought along on tape recorders and on little tapes, and but with housekeeping on board Apollo and the crowded conditions, you were just sort of alert all the time, making sure that things were going to get done right, and you weren't going to lose something and miss something. So I found that going to the moon, 3 days to the moon, was a busy deal.
In preparation for your mission, you did a lot of geology training.
Yeah.
And you, including going on some geology trips. Did Deke go on any of those geology trips with you?
I believe so. Not many, but I believe I remember seeing them in photographs. I don't remember exactly. We were focused mostly on volcanic terrain, and that was what they were expecting us to find in the Descartes Highlands, but there wasn't any. And so we started describing all these rocks that was unusual for them in mission control. But then they got very excited because they realized that we were finding something that they had not found before on lunar surface. And so our supply of rocks was unique because we landed in the Highlands. The nearest landing to us was Neil on the Tranquility, and if you consider him sea level, we were 8,000 feet above his landing spot, and we were the only flight that went to the highlands of the moon. And the highlands are the area that's white looking on as you look at a full moon, and so it was exciting. We had a rover, of course, with Apollo 15, 16, and 17 had a lunar module that would last for 3 days, and we had a lunar rover that made exploration 10 orders of magnitude easier and better than we had on the first 3 landings.
When having the rover, having a longer time on the moon, Are you glad that you did 16 as opposed to 11, which was, it was the first one, but they didn't get to stay there very long?
No, they didn't, but they got the first ones to do it, and that's a real challenge. Of course, I wasn't even near being considered, so it never entered my mind. And yeah, being on that first crew would have been an honor, I think. And but just wasn't so for us and our group. The first one to get on a flight crew backup was Apollo 11. And Fred Hayes was the backup lunar module lunar module pilot to Buzz Aldrin, and then he flew on 13, and then they had that blow up, but he did a great job.
How much fun was the lunar rover?
It revolutionized lunar exploration, no question about it, and it was fun. It was like Indy race car at times. John was the driver and I was the navigator, and you had a handle between the seats, and he pushed forward and you go forward, pull back, you put on the brakes, pull left and you turn left, and it was very maneuverable, very bouncy. Up on the moon, the car only weighed 80 pounds, so if you didn't like your parking place, you could just pick it up and take it somewhere else. And we did a couple of times, and so you strapped in. You had a seatbelt that you felt like you need because you bounced so much. And so John drove and I navigated and also took pictures every 50 meters or so. And it was exciting bouncing across bouncing across the moon, and the beauty was incredible. It was rough. It was rolling craters, and we had a big mountain off to the left called Stone Mountain. This was looking west, and to the left, which was be south, was Stone Mountain, and off to the north, across the valley, was the Smoky Mountains, and there was an objective up there called North Ray Crater that we wanted to reach, and we did that on the last excursion. So the rover revolutionized lunar exploration, and it was fun to ride, and you felt like you're running on ice. The back end kept fishtailing. It never sank in very far. The tracks were only an inch or two deep, and it had great traction. It would climb a 20 to 25 degree slope. Maximum speed was probably 17 kilometers per hour. And so we enjoyed riding it. I enjoyed riding it because I got to look around. John had to look at his right in front of the rover, because you'd go over a ridge and there'd be a crater there that you didn't have on your maps. So he'd have to swerve around and this, that, and the other. We spun out a couple of times, but it never felt like it was going to roll over on you. And we lost a fender. I think it was me. I got the right rear fender got stuck in my suit pocket. And I didn't realize it. And as I walked away, I pulled the fender off. And well, that's okay. So we started, and that was a big mistake saying it was okay, because the moon dust kept raining down on top of us, and we were just getting filthy. You couldn't brush the dust was so fine you couldn't brush it off. And so the suits, you look at our suits from when we landed, pure white. When we left, was mostly gray. And so, but they all worked. It was amazing. You could and all that dust and stuff like that was the big problem. We tracked it all inside, and so when we got back in orbit, it was dust everywhere. And in fact, Mattingly wouldn't let us in after we docked up, because he says, "You're not bringing all that dust in here." So he closed the door on us, and he floated over a vacuum cleaner, so we vacuumed up the dust as best we could. Then he let us come in.
Did you and John come up with your fender fix, or was that mission?
No, we didn't fix it. That was a mistake. We didn't think about it. But
Oh,
when it happened on Apollo 17, he said, "You guys got to fix that." And so we improvised with some clamps and a piece of checklist page. They just clamped it to the back, and that solved their problem. But we didn't worry about it. We just all of a sudden we were drowning in moon dust. It looked like.
There's a wonderful book called Across the Airless Wilds that is about the lunar rover, and I absolutely fell in love with the wheels because they're just made out of mesh.
Yeah.
And then it just flabbergasts me. But on the moon, 1/6 gravity, that's all you need.
Yeah, it had a springy interior. It was a spring, and but the outside of the wheel you could look through it because it was just mesh, and it really dug into the lunar surface and gave it really good traction. So you could climb a 25-degree slope in that car.
So in 2006, Deke was posthumously awarded the Ambassador of Exploration Award, which includes a moon rock that has to be displayed in a public place. So his widow, Bobby, chose our museum. So we have a moon rock, and it is from Apollo 16.
Wow.
Yes. And so now it is even extra special to me after talking to you, because I figure there's a 50-50 chance that you picked it up. And since I've spoken to you, I'm just going to say that you picked it up, and it's all from Charlie Duke. And I didn't realize that it's extra special because of where it came from, being from the Highlands.
Yeah.
So yes.
Only mission that went to the Highlands, and so it was very special for us. And as I said, we were having so much fun. I didn't want to come home. So come on, give us 2 more hours, and now I get back inside, you guys. We landed 6 hours late, as I said early in the program, and that used up a lot of power, and so we were. They didn't want to extend our stay because of the power budget we had and the batteries in the lunar module with that 6-hour delay.
Do you still look at the moon sometimes and think, wow, I've been there. That's where I was.
Yeah, I did every time on our cruise to Antarctica just recently. We had the moon, like the sun, it was this there, and it was so bright, no pollution down there, and I look up and it brought it all back, really. And we live in South Carolina now, and we got a good view, and it always brings back that memory of being there that 3 days in 1972. Yeah.
That's wonderful. What are you most proud of from your entire career at NASA?
There were a couple of events. Of course, I was pleased with backup crew on Apollo 13. I was on a committee that had to select were we going to keep the manufacturer for the lunar module ascent engine. I was on that committee, and then Stu Russo and I were after Apollo 1 fire, and we redesigned a spacecraft. We were on a team called Apollo Emergency Egress Working Group, and we had to develop procedures to get out of the spacecraft and get off the launch pad. And we worked about 6 months on that, so that was really really interesting. And then my backups. I was on probably more Apollo flights, associated with more Apollo flights than anybody. 5 of them I worked on. Of course,
Wow.
John Young flew twice, and Cernan flew twice, and Lovell flew twice, but nobody walked on the moon more than once. And Lovell would have been twice to the moon and landed, but then they blew up and they couldn't land. So just being involved with Apollo was just tremendous. After Apollo was over, I went to work on Space Shuttle, which was totally different atmosphere, and it was meetings here or meetings there. And it was basically in the basic design stage. And it just didn't have the appeal to me, the dynamics of Apollo. We'd have the Apollo program manager would have a meeting every Friday, and you'd go in and present your problem to him. And I can remember George Lowe, when he was the program manager, you go in and say, George, we got to fix this. And if you could convince him, he said, okay, do it. And they started to work right away. And, we need a tool or whatever. Well, get the tool. And so he made some real good decisions. And that's the way being a pilot, you better make right decisions not in a panic mode, but in a hurry. And so that was the way Apollo was in my experience. And but then shuttle was, they'd go to meetings. And so I lasted about 3 years after Apollo, and then decided to leave NASA. So look back now, and I said, why didn't I just wait another 4 years? Man, I'd have flown the shuttle, one of the first ones. But
I'm absolutely sure you would have, because
Yeah.
you were very young.
yeah, I was the youngest on the moon by 4 months. I tell everybody I'm 89 and I'm still the youngest man that walked on the moon.
Yes, you are. Yes. Yeah, you definitely would have gotten at least one shuttle flight had you stayed.
Yeah, probably one of the first test flights they had. They had 4 or 5 test pilot flights before. Then they took the ejection seats out and put in regular seats, and they started having more people on board.
Okay, we are going to start doing some questions from the audience. And we're going to start with Carla's question that we do with every guest. Were you in band or choir when you were in school?
I flunked 5th grade choir. That's how good I sang. And no, I was not. My twin brother played the clarinet. He was the musical twin. But this true story, when we were in the 5th grade, we had the Christmas pageant, and everybody in the 5th grade was going to be in the choir. So you auditioned, and my twin brother and I got up. We started singing, and the choir director said, "Okay, everybody's in the choir. You two guys stand over there, learn the words, move your mouth, but no noise." Musical. I love music. I love country music, especially, and I sing a lot to myself, but not in public.
I would like Don Irwin to unmute himself. He is at the Niagara Aerospace Museum in Niagara Falls, New York. And he has a question for you, and he is sitting in front of something I think you will recognize.
Okay.
Hey, Charlie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for being here this afternoon. We've got a few of our volunteers and staff from the museum, and you might recognize over there your ride off the surface of the moon. That's the Lunar Module Ascent engine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we show that to our guests. We're very proud of it. It was, developed by Bell, just right down the road from us here in Niagara Falls. Is there any insight that you have into that engine that we could share with our guests when they come and visit? Anything from how it felt just before you guys pressed the button to come up, or about its development? Anything, we'd love to hear it.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
Is there any thing you can share that we might share with our guests about the Lunar Module Ascent engine?
Well, it was an engine that was very, very critical, of course, and it had to work. And we were having trouble with the stability in the test of the engine built by Bell that was having trouble with the injector, and so it was unstable a little bit. Probably was going to be okay, but they put the committee together that I was the astronaut representative on, and we went around the country to see if we're going to change the contractor. And the decision was made, I think, by George Lowe later on, based on our recommendations, that we better have a secondary supply. And so we picked Aerojet, I think. No, anyway, they built the Rocketdyne. Yeah, thank you. And they built a new injector that was a lot more stable. So the rest of the engine that you see there was all the same. It was just an injector plate.
Yeah, were they close at all to just replacing the whole engine with the Rocketdyne engine, or?
No, they just took the whole engine and they changed the injector plate. Was all they did, as I recall.
Hopefully that also answers Walter Gordon's question. So Raoul is in the Netherlands, and he wants to know that hanging prominently above their couch is one of the pictures that you took on Apollo 16. And he's also wondering if you still drink orange juice.
Yes, but I do, but I don't put it in a plastic bag and stick it to my chest inside a spacesuit anymore. That was a big mess. The idea was being outside for 8 hours. You needed some refreshment, so we had a gallon bag velcroed to our liquid cooled garment, and the straw came up inside here, and so John and I decided we'd put orange juice in there to give us some energy. And on this side, there was a little candy bar. It came up, and you could grab it and eat it. Well, I had a 6-hour delay in lunar orbit. I had a leaky valve over here, and out come a drop of orange juice floating around inside your helmet, and trying to suck it in, and their tongue wasn't long enough, and you couldn't reach it. It was just a pain. It started getting on my nose and climbing up, and it was in my hearing Snoopy hat. So finally, I took it off, plugged it up. I took my helmet off, plugged it up, and we still had the drink bags on the moon, but we put water in there instead of orange juice. It was really sticky. And,
and they wanted you to drink extra orange juice on your mission, correct?
We did. We had plastic bags as part of a meal, probably breakfast. We didn't eat much on the moon. We had we ate a little bit when we woke up. We had all this stuff, this candy bar inside that munch on outside. And then when we came back in, we ate another meal. Problem on the lunar module was no hot water. So you couldn't get any of the food hot. You couldn't have any coffee or any tea, any hot tea. You couldn't have any hot stuff. So it was not very appetizing, to be honest. And so we didn't eat very much on the moon.
Bob would like to know, what do you think of the plan to establish a new federal holiday to honor the success of the Apollo 11 mission and the first time humans walked on the moon?
There are a lot of federal holidays, and Apollo 11 was, I think, one of the greatest events in humanity. First time we left terrestrial Earth and went to another body and landed on it, and it was a very historic moment. So I think that would be a good idea to have a national holiday for space or Apollo or something like that, to recognize the accomplishments of the pioneers in space, like Deke and the other 7.
Logan would like to know, what specific contribution did you have with the design of your Apollo 16 patch?
We just told the Apollo patch, we had some ideas. We wanted to incorporate NASA. We wanted to incorporate US. We wanted to have the moon in the background. We wanted like a symbol of the flag. So we just told this artist at NASA who was and said, "Hey, these are the ideas we want, and would you come up with a design?" And she did. And we first time we saw it was, man, this is fantastic. It had the wishbone for NASA and an American shield and an eagle, and then the moon background and our names on it. And so we didn't change a bit. As far as I remember, we didn't change it a bit. It was just perfect for us. One thing the humility of the Apollo 11 crew, they were the only crew that didn't have their name on the patch. Everybody else had their names on the patch.
Oh.
You look at Apollo 11 patch, it doesn't have any names on it. And Neil said, "This is not our mission. It's the U.S. mission," or something like that. It was this idea. So, but everybody else I want my name on my patch.
I don't think I've ever noticed that. That's interesting. Thank you for telling us that. Ed is wondering, he is a space exploration merit badge counselor for Boy Scouts. He was wondering if you or anyone else you know had any say in the badge.
No, I didn't. And as far as I know, none of the astronauts that had the space badge, that when they designed that and put it, none of the astronauts who were Boy Scouts had any input to that. I certainly didn't. I don't know about anybody else.
Peter asks, how do you envision the future of lunar exploration? Human bases, mining?
Well, at first we got to get there and land again, and that's going to be very difficult. The target is the South Pole region, and if you look at the photographs that have been taken by LRO, it's very, very rough terrain, very steep, very dark shadows. The sun never gets above about 2 degrees of the horizon. And the reason we're going down there is because if there is ice or water in the form of ice on the moon, it's down there because of the low sun angles. The temperature doesn't get really extreme, and it never gets night. It's always partly daylight. But the terrain is really, at least the photographs I've seen, terrain is really rough and the shadows are really dark. And so, but they're going to make it. They got a good spacecraft. I've seen the automatic landing systems in Artemis, and I was very impressed. And crucial training, I think that we're going to have with Artemis, a beginning of a space station on the moon. And I think it's something that we need to learn a lot of resources on the moon. I think bringing helium-3 back, if you talk to Jack Schmidt, he says that's a resource that's not down here, but it's up on the moon, and we extract that and then bring it back. It's a radioactive material, and you can put in a reactor, a special reactor, and there's no residue left over. And it would be a great power source for nuclear reactors. So I think there's a lot of advantages to start building a base on the lunar surface. If we can do it in Antarctica, we can do it on the moon. Yeah.
Our next question is from McKean. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I heard that some white paint on Apollo 16's lunar module that was supposed to cool the lunar module ascent stage peeled on Apollo 16. Is it known when or why the paint peeled?
It was paint. And when we got into the lunar module. Well, not before that. When we docked, I looked out the window and this stuff was just floating off, and little specks. And I said, "Oh no! If that's a fuel leak, we've had it." And because it was right near one of the tanks, turned out there was a paint. It was paint peeling off, and had been applied incorrectly, and for some reason, this paint was just flaking off, and it slowly stopped. And we didn't know what it was until we landed and got out. And I looked up, and it was right under the radar antenna, not radar antenna, but the communication antenna, and it was all flaked off paint. And we decided it wasn't a big problem, and we still don't know why that happened.
Steve asks, after Apollo 13's safe return to Earth, was there any consideration to letting Lovell's crew fly the next mission?
No, not that I know. You'd have to ask Deke and Alan about that. That was above my pay grade.
And something tells me that Alan Shepard would not have allowed that to happen.
Well, I mean, that'd have been a big fight.
I
Yeah,
think
if they hadn't canceled 18, 19, and 20, it would have been made sense to put them in there. But it was a tight schedule until the 13 accident, and and the crews were already selected, and I'm sorry, but you had your chance and just didn't work out. Too bad.
yeah. I forgot to mention this way back when we were talking about how Deke selected crews. If you read his book, according to him, it was very simple and logical how he did crew selection. And he kind of explains it, but then there's this exception and this exception, and I like that no one knew. Made you stay on your toes.
Yeah. Well, it's been a long time. I got to get that book out and try to see what he says about it. To me, it was a big secret, and so I just had some ideas. Thankfully, he picked me. They had to pick somebody, and they picked me, and I was so excited.
Alan asks, can you talk about the wonderful Hasselblad cameras that were attached to the front of your spacesuit, and how easy or difficult the cameras were to use while on the moon?
Well, the camera was fantastic, and it was easy to change the film, even in the gloves of your spacesuit. And they issued us a camera. Once you got on a crew, they'd issue a backup camera or something like that, and we just practiced a lot. I remember taking them home on the weekend, and I'd put one, and I'd have it on and I'd go around the backyard clicking. I'd take the kids out sailing, not sailing, but boating, and so you learn, and we just practice and practice and practice, and so you got used to how you had to hold it to get this view, and how you could bend over and how you could point it. And it was just with practice, but the camera was rock solid, I'll tell you. And it had color film or black and white, and it was easy to change the film canisters. They were big, and they were easy to grab up on a glove. The only thing crazy I did one time was right after we got on the surface, I had to change from black and white to color film. When I started to put the color film on, I looked at it and it had dust all over it. And I started blowing the dust off. It didn't work. I said, what am I doing? And I just went ahead and put it on the camera. The camera worked really fantastic. It was battery operated, and took some great pictures, and easy to operate up on the moon.
Barbara, who is our first guest from Poland, she asks, in your long career as a pilot and astronaut, you have flown many aircraft. What was your favorite, but you cannot include the LEM.
Well, of course, I call the moon an aircraft too, and it was probably the ultimate flying machine. Didn't look like a flying machine, but it flew. Airplanes, it depends on the mission. I was a fighter interceptor pilot, and the best airplane I flew over there was the F-102. When I got to test pilot school, I think the favorite I had was a F-104. We flew various missions in test pilot school. One that was really exciting. You fly, you go out 100 miles and turn around and accelerate in full afterburner back towards Edwards. And when they said pull, you just pull the plane up to a 45-degree angle and let it go. And it's 75,000 feet, 65,000. The afterburner blew out. And then at 75,000, you had to shut the engine down, and you just coasted over the top, and you could make 100,000 feet. And you look off, and there's the Edwards Air Force Base off to your left. And as you start down, you had to be very careful on the rudders, because the engine was rotating and the torque was pulling you, I think, right. So you had very little directional control at 100,000 feet, but enough to control it, and you started back down. That was the most fun mission and the most fun airplane that I flew in my career. But it wasn't a good fighter. I would not have liked to go into war in a 104.
I'm going to break my rule and ask a second question from Logan, because I like this question that he asks. Related to navigation and guidance, did you know or meet Margaret Hamilton, who wrote the software for the navigation and guidance system?
I don't recall her particularly, but I mean exactly. But yeah, we'd go up there and we talk to the software folks. And having worked on the Apollo guidance and navigation system that MIT was building, I'm sure sometime in that 6 months, and when I was working in the station lab, these ladies had come in and people had come in, but I don't remember her specifically. But they did a fantastic job coding in such a way they could get in the lunar module. We could get 6 programs in 85,000 words, 80K memory, and I mean, you can't even turn on your cell phone in 80K memory today. So they did a fantastic job.
Julian says, hey, Charlie, when you were Capcom for Apollo 11 landing, do you reckon your heart rate exceeded those of Neil and Buzz?
I have no way of knowing. I know I was tense and excited. We were focused. And it was a great relief, as I said earlier in the program. When we touched down, I heard Buzz say, "Engine stop." The tension in mission control just evaporated, and man, we made it. It was a big cheer, and the coolest guy on either end was Neil Armstrong. You know, he didn't hardly say anything during the descent. But we landed on him, and Buzz was talking, and he said, "Contact engine stop." And then he said, then Neil had to put the switches in the right position. And then the calmest voice, and I think in the room, was Neil. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." It was just sort of, I had attitude. I didn't hear any excitement or awe with him. And so we were just erupting, in mission control. So it was the coolest, I think, one of the coolest guys that I've ever met as far as piloting skills.
Mm-hmm. Amanda is wondering, what was the most memorable interaction you had with Deke?
Probably when he found out I had the measles.
That's not what I was expecting.
And it was what are you doing with the measles? I said, Moss, I didn't even know I had never had the measles. I explained everything. But the interaction I had with him in mission control was very, every time I was Capcom, he was sitting nearby or either back in the back row. And generally, except that one comment he made, shut up and let him land, was he just watched, and there was a good support. He's a sweet guy. I loved him.
And I know you've said that your dad was very good about being dad when he came home and leaving work at work. Do you remember when the whole measles thing happened right before 13? Did he talk about that at all?
No, he didn't.
No, I don't think so. I don't remember. I know they were floundering, not floundering around, but they were really, what are we going to do? And so apparently they got together, Deke and Al got together with Lovell and said, you guys got a week or so to get going. And if you don't think you're ready to go, we'll cancel this thing. And Lovell and them said, we're okay. And they lifted off.
So Kent, that wasn't anything that he brought home?
No, I don't remember any discussions about. I mean, I remember that being a thing, but not a lot of detail.
Yeah. So I was sick. I wasn't involved in all of that. Just the change of the crew, and I was realized what was going on, but they wanted me out of contact with, not exposing everybody, because I was a lot of people were still without the measles, and I was still contagious.
Bill is wondering if you can describe the moon landing on 16, in which the guidance system was initially taking you into a crater. Who noticed that first, and how close to the surface were you when manual control was taken?
At 7,000 feet, the computer shifted over to, I think, P65, which was the last landing program. And that was the first time John saw the surface. And the computer gave you what was called LPD, landing point designation. And there were two, on John's window, there were two ladders. And when you lined the ladders up at 45, and if the LPD was 45, that was where you're going to land. If he didn't like it, hold on a minute, wait a minute. My phone rang on my computer here. So anyway, so if he didn't like that landing spot, he could change. Redesignate is what I'm trying to say. And so he was doing that all the way down 3 or 4 times. I was talking him down, giving him altitude, rate of descent, forward velocity, lateral velocity, running the spacecraft, looking out my side, make sure he's not landing in a crater on my side. And so as he gets down, he redesignated, and we were about 100 feet and basically stable, level, and we started down at 3 or 4 feet per second. And about 20 feet above the surface, according to the computer, he levels off, and we just hovered. I said, come on, John, give me a couple of clicks down. And he had a little vernier switch. One click would give you 1 foot per second, up or down, depending on how you flip the switch. And so we started down at 1 foot per second, and he was dead level. I looked out to make sure he wasn't landed on a rock on my side. We were blowing dust everywhere out, and he brought it right on down. And when we contacted, I was like Buzz. I said, contact, engine stop, and he stopped the engine, and we fell in the last 3 or 4 feet, and we were dead level. It was just really amazing selection spot he picked. And like on Apollo, we didn't have any problem with our trajectory in the computer. The problem was that the study of the landing site was done from photographs taken by Stu Russo on Apollo 14, and those photographs didn't have resolution below 40 feet. So all the small objects below 40 feet weren't in the photographs. And when we pitched over, man, look at all those craters, the 30 footers, the 20 footers, the 15 footers, and which would swallow a lunar module. And so he had to maneuver around and to find a spot that was level and without a crater.
Dave has a fun question for you. The Museum of Flight in Seattle has Apollo Command Module 7A on display. Would you talk about the time you spent 3 days at sea inside that vessel with Jim Lovell and Stu Russo? And I'm going to add to that, why did you volunteer to do that knowing that you get so seasick?
Still can't understand why I did that, but it sounded interesting, really. Lovell came to Stu and I, and we had jobs, but we weren't assigned to any crew at this point. And so I can't imagine Lovell doing it, but he did. And so they put us in this thing and dropped us in the water, and there was nothing in it. It was all just the boilerplate, So we had some food and we had some waste bags and stuff like that, and drinking water and stuff like it was miserable. Actually, it was sweating inside, and the environmental control system wasn't really working right. And but it worked. I mean, we stayed alive for 3 days in there, and looking back, I said I'd never do that again. So, but I mean, it was something to get involved in, and so I'm working on propulsion systems and something, just working on the whole spacecraft, and I thought, well, maybe this would be something that would be exciting. It wasn't exciting, but it was something. Oh Lord, I never would volunteer again. I said, Lovell, don't you get me into this again.
I remember reading that in your book, and I thought, what are you doing, silly? You get seasick. An interesting side note.
I didn't get seasick. That's the main thing. I mean, no, not on that. I got sick at the Navy when I was on the Navy ships at Naval Academy. But back then, we didn't have any seasick pills. But I took some seasick pills with us when I got on the spacecraft. And now I go on a cruise and I pop those pills every day, and I don't get seasick anymore. So, but back then, I would have if I hadn't taken those Dramamines or whatever they were.
Interesting side note, Deke Slayton's diamond astronaut pin that was given to him by the Apollo 1 crew is on display at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, thanks to Gene Cernan and Neil Armstrong. And it sold at auction, and it had nothing to do with the Slayton family. Kent had nothing to do with that, so don't think he did. I think we have time for one more question. Thank you, Charlie, for letting us go late. And I think this is a good one to end with. Pete Frank was a flight director on Apollo 16, but we don't hear much about him because he died early. What can you tell us about him?
Well, he was a good flight director. I knew him personally, but I never worked with him. The flight directors that I worked with was Gene Kranz and Jerry Griffin. And I was on their teams at various times. But Frank ran another flight team and they all did a great job. Chris Graff had trained them, and they were all very, very proficient. And Pete was, if I recall, very serious and quiet, but very efficient. And his crew, every flight director was outstanding in Apollo. We didn't have any weak spots.
Right, I was just reading to make sure that I got as many questions as I could. And I apologize that we didn't get to everyone's questions. But again, Charlie, thank you so much for being with us and also for going overtime. I knew that I think from now on we should just make these all an hour and a half because we never get done in an hour.
Yeah. Especially with somebody talks as much as me. I can. I
I didn't want to say that.
can.
We also had Hoot Gibson, and Hoot is a good talker as well. And
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, I think from now on we just need to be an hour and a half. It's a pleasure to meet you. I don't know if you remember at Tom Stafford's funeral when I went running up to you very quickly and
Yeah.
said who I was.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. It's nice seeing you again. And that, by the way, that Tom Stafford was a really good friend, and he his little museum in Weatherford is really nice, and you know he could have been buried at Arlington National or the Naval Academy or anywhere he wanted, but he wanted to be next to his dad. So
Yeah, and in his hometown, and I find that very commendable. And
yeah,
not to take anything away from Tom, but the fact that Deke had his ashes spread over his family farm out in Leon, I just think that is very very touching of
yeah,
how important your home and your roots are for where you end up in life.
yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna uh, take the Naval Academy cemetery. I can qualify for that. So I graduated from Naval Academy, and Bill Anders is buried there, and a lot of the other flagged officers and Navy and Marines and friends of mine are there. So
Yeah.
you can have a tombstone there, and like in Arlington, not anymore. So
You can't be in Arlington anymore?
yeah, I could if I wanted.
Oh. Oh, I'm sorry.
I decided it'd be better for me. I'm looking at the Naval Academy for
Uh-huh.
my site. So
Would Dottie be able to be buried there as well?
yeah, yes. Well, she wants to be cremated, and if she goes first, we just hold everything and go together. If I go first, then they got a way to do that. So, but we're both in good health, so not expected to fade away. But you never know. We ought to be
That
ready.
is true.
Well, God bless you all, and thank you for listening, everyone. And I've enjoyed being with you. And have a great 2025.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you on our next episode.
2 thumbs up. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank
God
you.
bless.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks,
God bless
Elizabeth.
everybody. Good to see you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Signing off.